My mother used to sing in smoky bars wrapped in red velvet and secrets. They say she had a voice that could make a man forget his wedding ring, and maybe that's why none of them ever stayed. When I was born, she told me I ruined her dreams. But then she'd curl my hair like hers and dress me in old satin from her stage days. She'd say, "Clara, you're the better version of me. You might get the life I never did." But she didn't mean that. Every time I got close to someone, she found a way to pull them in and push me out. Not loudly, not violently, just seduction cloaked in sorrow. Regret as a weapon. The first time it happened, I thought it was my fault. The second, I tried to make excuses for her. By the third, I started to wonder what exactly I reminded her of. She blamed my eyes, she blamed my smile, she blamed my softness, my hope, my ability to love without being afraid. "You remind me of the girl I used to be," she said once, voice thick with wine, "before I learned what men really want." So she slept with them, whispered her wounds into their ears like poetry until they stopped seeing me at all. By 19, I had no illusions left. Just one last thread of respect holding our relationship together. And then she started therapy. Art-based healing, she called it. With a man named Daniel Cross, who led inner child workshops and made women cry in circles around watercolor. She said it was saving her life. But Daniel used to be hers too back when she was 17 and full of songs. He left her back then. I think she wanted him to see her now. Beautiful, damaged, desperate. What she didn't expect was that I'd book a session of my own, under another name, with another version of the same story. If she could turn healing into performance, then so could I. My mother ruined every relationship I had for reminding her of who she used to be. So I reminded her therapist of who he really was. My name is Clara Bennett. I turned 19 last fall on a Wednesday that smelled like cinnamon and snow. I live in a house with peeling paint and walls full of old records, vinyl sleeves of Billie Holiday, Janis Joplin, and some woman named Vivian Rose. That last one isn't famous. She's my mother. Growing up, I thought we were close. People said we looked alike, and my mother would smile like it was both a compliment and a warning. She used to brush my hair slowly, murmuring lyrics under her breath like lullabies. "You've got stage blood," she'd say. "You're not meant for quiet lives." But I didn't want a stage. I wanted peace. Still, I sang mostly because it made her happy. Because when I sang, she'd close her eyes like she was listening to herself through time. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she clapped, and sometimes she walked away mid-song, leaving me with silence thick as guilt. My mother, Vivian Bennett, used to be Vivian Rose, a lounge singer in her 20s, moving from one seedy club to another, never quite making it out. She had lovers, admirers, enemies. She never kept them separate for long. By 30, she had me. No husband, no plan. Just the idea that I would somehow justify everything she'd lost. She is beautiful in that vintage, aching way. High cheekbones, dark red lips, curls that never quite obey gravity. She still wears heels around the house, still spritzes herself with that old Chanel perfume before grocery runs. But there's something brittle behind her eyes, something hungry. She says men are weak, that love is a game, that no one stays unless you make them believe they can't live without you. I didn't believe her until I met Eli. Eli Matthews was 20, thoughtful, with hands that fixed broken radios and eyes that made you feel like a song. He was kind, gentle. He didn't look at me like I was too much. I thought maybe he'd be the exception. He met my mother 2 weeks into our relationship. I brought him home after choir rehearsal. She greeted him barefoot, wearing one of her old robes, the neckline slipping a little too far. "You brought me a record player," she joked, pointing at Eli. "Because I haven't seen that kind of vintage in a while." He laughed, unsure. She smiled, sure of everything. Over the next few weeks, things changed. He grew quiet, distant. He stopped texting me goodnight. I'd catch him glancing toward the kitchen whenever he came over, where she always seemed to be peeling fruit in slow, deliberate circles. When I finally asked him what was going on, he looked at me like I'd asked why fire was hot. Your mom, she's magnetic, Clara. I don't know how to explain it. She gets under your skin. My throat closed. I didn't ask him to explain further. I already knew. Vivian never apologized. She never admitted anything. Just shrugged and said, "You'll understand one day." 3 boys before Eli had walked away. One had spent too much time fixing her car. Another said she understood him better. The last one just disappeared. Each time I forgave. Each time I told myself it wasn't her fault. That maybe I was broken in ways I couldn't see. But after Eli, something snapped. She wasn't satisfied with stealing attention. She wanted my reflection, my life. And when she couldn't live it, she destroyed it. Then came Daniel Cross. She found him at an art therapy workshop in town. He called himself a creative trauma guide. Not a licensed therapist, but a man who wore scarves in summer and said things like, "Pain is just art waiting to happen." She started going every week. Came back with watercolors of broken hearts and journal entries about her inner girl. She said he helped her feel whole, that he saw the parts of her no one else did. She never told me they had history. I found out from an old photo in a shoebox under her bed Vivian at 17 leaning against a boy with a crooked grin and eyes like Daniel's. On the back D and V, forever before it ended. It made sense. The intensity, the obsession. She wasn't healing. She was reliving. And I was in the way. Again. So I decided to meet him. Not as Clara Bennett, but as someone else. Someone broken. Someone invisible. Someone just like her. I called the art center the next morning using a softer version of my voice. I said my name was Lena May, a first-year college student looking for help with creative blocks and unresolved family trauma. They welcomed me warmly. No ID required, just cash. It was too easy. The following Thursday, I walked into the Whitestone Community Arts Center for Daniel Cross's Inner Voices workshop. The room smelled like lavender oil and paint water. He stood at the front barefoot in a linen shirt, surrounded by easels and women with soft faces and hard stories. He was older now than in the photo. Gray streaked his hair, but his eyes were the same sharp, searching, always calculating. When his gaze landed on me, I felt it linger. "Welcome," he said. Voice smooth as honey left too long in a warm cabinet. "You're safe here." I nodded, clutching my sketchbook. I kept my answers vague, careful, practiced. I told him my mother had been distant, overbearing. I told him music used to feel like joy, but now felt like a burden. I said I felt invisible in my own home. He called it emotional shadowing. He told me I was brave. Vivian used the same word when I sang solo for the first time. "So brave," she said, though her eyes were empty. Each week, I returned. Sat on the floor like the others curled over blank paper pretending to process. Daniel noticed me more each time. He'd stop behind my chair and touch my shoulder lightly. He'd comment on the sadness in my sketches, the tension in my lines. "Lena, there's so much unsaid in your art. You don't have to carry that alone." He'd offer to stay after just to talk. I always declined politely. That made him push harder. Meanwhile, at home, Vivian was glowing. "Daniel thinks I've turned a corner," she said one night over microwaved lasagna. "He says I'm finally reconnecting with my truest self." I watched her twirl her fork in air wearing my favorite cardigan, her perfume layered on thick. "You mean your 17-year-old self?" I asked. Her smile faltered. "He understands me," she said tightly, "more than anyone ever has. He sees what I've survived." I nodded, filing that sentence away. By the 6th week, Daniel handed me a flyer for a weekend retreat. "It's invite only," he said, smiling gently. "But I think you're ready." It was hosted at a renovated farmhouse just outside town. Wood-burning stoves, no cell service, lots of tea. A perfect place to unravel. I told Vivian I was going to a study camp with my choir group. She barely noticed. Her focus was on packing her chiffon dresses for the same retreat. She hadn't been invited officially. Daniel's rules forbade overlapping clients, but she'd talked her way in. He says we should keep our dynamic contained to group work, she told me. But he doesn't mean it. She wore her hair up that weekend, loose tendrils framing her face. Her heels clicked across the farmhouse floorboards as if she were entering a stage. On the first night, we painted masks to represent our emotional defenses. Vivian's was gold cracked in the center. Mine was blank, save for a single dark stroke over the eyes. Daniel hovered near mine the longest. "You've hidden so much, Lena." "I learned from the best," I said, voice steady. The second night after meditation, Daniel invited me to the library room. Alone, just to talk. I recorded everything. He sat too close. His knee brushed mine. He asked if I'd ever felt loved fully. He asked if I thought maybe our pain had drawn us together for a reason. I didn't need to touch him. I didn't need to lead him on. He walked himself off the edge. "I don't usually connect like this with someone so young," he murmured. "But with you, it feels different." That's what Eli had said to me. Word for word. The next day, I sent copies of the recordings to the Arts Center board, to the local newspaper, and to a few trusted bloggers who wrote about therapy abuse. By Monday, Daniel's website was gone. The center issued a vague statement about misconduct. The retreat program was canceled indefinitely. Vivian didn't take it well. She sat in the living room smoking a cigarette she'd quit 10 years ago. "They're saying things about him, about me." I said nothing. She looked at me, then her eyes wide with disbelief. "You did this. You did this," I echoed softly. I just stopped pretending not to see it. She threw the ashtray against the wall. 2 days later, she found the sketchbook I'd left on my bed. The cover read, "To the version of me that still believed in you." Inside were drawings of her, of Daniel, of Eli. Each one traced with precision, lined with truth. She didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Then she began therapy again with someone new this time. A woman named Rebecca, licensed and soft-spoken. Vivian didn't trust her. "She doesn't understand artists," she complained. But Rebecca wasn't for her. She was for me. Rebecca's office didn't smell like incense. There were no paintbrushes in mason jars or dream catchers on the walls, just books. Real books. Boundaries, trauma cycles, family systems. She offered tea, not essential oils. And she never said inner child like it was a brand. I didn't tell her everything at first. I just said I needed help navigating entanglements, mother things. She nodded. She didn't press. That made me trust her. Over weeks, the truth spilled out thread by thread. I told her about Vivian, about the boys, about Daniel, about how therapy in our house had become a new kind of performance, another stage for my mother to shine on. Only this time she was the victim. Rebecca never called Vivian sick. She said words like patterns, coping mechanisms, generational trauma. And then when I was ready, she said something that stuck. "You can stop the cycle, Clara. You don't have to win. You just have to stop playing her game." But I didn't believe her yet. I still needed something to land, something to break. Because Vivian wasn't broken. She was livid. After Daniel's collapse, she tried to rebuild the narrative. Claimed the accusations were fabricated. Said Daniel had been targeted by bitter students. Then she pivoted, said I'd been jealous that I'd seduced him to hurt her. She posted vague quotes on Facebook. "Some daughters destroy what they can't understand." Friends commented with heart emojis. Some asked if she was okay. She loved that part. Sympathy always made her radiant. But the local blog post about Daniel went viral. Other women from the retreat came forward. One of them, a mother of 2, filed a report with the State Board of Mental Health. Even though Daniel wasn't licensed, he'd been presenting himself as a professional. That was enough for an investigation. Vivian stopped going outside. She stayed in robes, smoked in the kitchen again. I started locking my door at night. One morning, I found her in my room, standing in front of my mirror, wearing my favorite dress. It clung tighter on her frame, but she posed anyway, one hand on her hip. "This used to be mine," she said. "You're just borrowing it." She didn't mean the dress. That night she cooked dinner, chicken pot pie, her specialty. She smiled like nothing had happened. I stared at my plate. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "maybe we should start over. Take a trip. Somewhere with music and mountains. I'm not going anywhere with you." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes cooled. "Then maybe you should go," she said. "Move out. Get your own life. Stop feeding off mine." That was the last thread. I packed my things in silence over the next 3 days. I moved into a small room behind the local bookstore owned by an older couple who gave me free coffee and too much advice. They had a spare key, a washer dryer, and no interest in my mother. I started singing again just for me. No stage, no spotlight, just voice and air. But Vivian wasn't finished. 2 weeks after I left, she mailed letters to the dean of my music program accusing me of academic dishonesty. She emailed Rebecca claiming I was weaponizing therapy against my own family. She even left a message at the bookstore pretending to be a customer, asking if Clara May was still working the register. She was unraveling, loudly, publicly, so I did what she feared most. I went quiet. I stopped replying. I stopped defending myself. I just let her spin. Then one morning I got a call from a woman named Margaret. She spoke slowly, clearly, the way older people do when they want to be sure you hear every word. "I used to know your mother," she said, "back when she was Vivian Rose. She sang at my brother's jazz club. She was memorable." Margaret was Daniel's ex-wife. She'd seen the blog, recognized the name, put the pieces together. She invited me to meet her for tea in Portland. I agreed. Margaret was tall, graceful, with silver hair in a braid down her back. She carried a folder. "I left Daniel 10 years ago," she said. "After I found texts from a 19-year-old student. He said it was a one-time thing. I knew better." She opened the folder. Inside were documents, emails, receipts, a timeline. Vivian's name appeared in more than one. She'd reconnected with Daniel at least a year earlier than she claimed. They'd exchanged messages. She'd attended a different retreat under another name. She wanted to recreate something Margaret said, but she didn't care who got hurt along the way. I asked Margaret why she was giving me this. "Because she hurt you. And because women like her don't stop unless someone makes them." The next day, I sent the file to the investigator working Daniel's case. I didn't include a note. It didn't need one. Then I visited my father. He lived 2 hours east, remarried, quiet life. I hadn't seen him since I was 13. He opened the door slowly, unsure. "I'm Clara," I said. "I'm not here for her. I'm here for me." He nodded once and let me in. We sat in the sunroom. I told him everything. He cried quietly when I mentioned Eli. He looked away when I said the name Daniel Cross. "She did that to you?" he asked. "She did it to all of them," I said. "And no one ever stopped her." He stood, walked to the hallway, pulled down a dusty box from a shelf. Inside were photos, legal documents, letters he never sent. "I tried," he said. "But she made me the villain. Said I left you. That I didn't care. I know the truth now." He gave me the box. Inside was a picture of me at 3 years old standing on stage in a red dress holding a plastic microphone. Vivian behind me, her smile too wide. "She always needed a mirror," he said. I stayed the night. Slept in the guest room under a quilt his wife had sewn. In the morning, I left with the box. I didn't go back to Vivian's house. I didn't answer her calls. But I mailed her one thing, an envelope containing a single page. It was the flyer for Daniel's revoked program stamped with the words "permanently discontinued." On the back, I wrote, "You taught me how to destroy things. I taught myself how to end them." She didn't reply. But 2 days later, Rebecca received an anonymous message saying I'd been spiritually abusing my own therapist. She laughed when she read it to me. "She's spiraling," Rebecca said. "I know I said, but I'm not chasing her down." I paused. "She'll burn herself out. Or someone else," Rebecca said quietly. "She won't get to me again. How can you be sure I looked at the window at the sun falling on the carpet at the quiet that wasn't empty? Because I'm not afraid of her anymore." Vivian didn't disappear. She faded slowly like the smell of old perfume on clothes you don't wear anymore. I still saw glimpses of her online. Grainy photos, vague captions, posts about betrayal, rebirth, and rising from the ashes. Every few months, she reinvented herself. Life coach, vocal mentor, self-love advocate. But her voice wasn't as loud anymore. Daniel lost everything. The art center dissolved the partnership. Local media ran a quiet follow-up confirming he had misrepresented his credentials. No charges were filed, technicalities and loopholes. But his name became a warning. Google made sure of that. Vivian kept her distance, for the most part. Once I saw her across the parking lot outside the grocery store. She stood near her car keys dangling from one hand, sunglasses hiding nothing. I walked past her without looking. She didn't call my name, didn't follow. Maybe she was learning, or maybe she was just tired. I started college in Seattle that fall. Music education, not performance. I didn't want stages. I wanted to teach kids how to find their voice before someone else taught them to be silent. I got a part-time job at a community center, helping teens through art and storytelling. Most came from families like mine. Not always loud, not always bruised, but full of cracks that made the air hard to breathe. There was one girl, Alyssa, 16, quiet, angry. She drew forests on fire. Said her mom was too pretty to be crazy. I knew what that meant. She told me once she's jealous when I get attention, but then she acts like I don't exist. I nodded. That's not your fault. No one had told me that at 16. Maybe if someone had, it wouldn't have taken me so long to believe it. I never told Alyssa my full story, but I told her the most important part. You don't have to become her. She cried when I said it. Not loud. Just a single tear down her cheek. The kind of cry that comes when someone finally says what you've been holding your whole life. Months passed. I stopped checking Vivian's page. Her updates got shorter. Her followers fewer. Eventually, she made her account private. Then it was gone. Rebecca said that was a good sign. But I didn't care either way. I wasn't watching anymore. On my 21st birthday, my father sent me a card. No check, no flowers. Just a photo of me at 7 holding a birthday cupcake, my hair in braids. "You've always been the light," he wrote. "I'm sorry I left you in the dark." I cried harder at that than I had in years. Later that night, after dinner with friends and 2 glasses of red wine, I sat alone and wrote a letter I never planned to send. It read, "You loved the idea of me more than the reality. You wanted a second chance at your youth. But I was never your past. I was always your future. And now I've reclaimed it." I folded the letter, burned it in a glass dish by the window, watched the smoke curl upward. Some things don't deserve to be archived. By spring, I was singing again. Just for the kids. Lullabies mostly. Sometimes old jazz songs, the ones Vivian used to hum when she forgot to be cruel. One day, Alyssa handed me a drawing. A girl standing alone in a forest, but the trees weren't burning anymore. There were birds this time. Sky. I kept that drawing. Framed it above my bed. When I told Rebecca about it, she smiled. You see, the cycle didn't just stop. You reversed it. Maybe she was right. Vivian didn't attend my graduation. I didn't expect her to. Didn't want her to. But I wore lipstick that day deep red like hers. A reminder. A refusal. A reclamation. After the ceremony, my dad hugged me tight and whispered, "She'll never take anything from you again." I nodded. Because she already had everything she ever could. And I was still standing, still singing, still mine.